100th woman entered my quarters at midnight, and I didn't even look up from my book. You can tell the Queen that sending another one won't change my answer, I said, turning a page. The Velanthi female, tall, silver-skinned with those characteristic luminescent eyes, froze in the doorway. They always did when they realized I wasn't going to play along. The human knows, she whispered, more to herself than to me. The human has been counting. I finally met her gaze. You're number 100. Congratulations. There's tea on the table if you want some before you report back. She stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. In Velanthi culture, refusing a potential mate, especially one sent by royalty, was unthinkable. Refusing 100 of them? That was either madness or suicide. Perhaps both. I was Marcus Chen, the sole human representative on Velanthis Prime, sent here as part of Earth's desperate bid for galactic recognition. A junior diplomat with no noble blood, no military honors, no wealth. The Galactic Council had assigned me to the Velanthi Empire as a gesture that was meant to be an insult, a nothing species sending a nothing man to a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel while humans were still discovering fire. But Queen Seraphis had taken an interest in me. Or rather, in the puzzle I represented. Why do you refuse us? The woman asked, genuine confusion in her voice. We are considered the most desirable females in 12 systems. Our genetic compatibility with humans has been confirmed. The Queen herself selected each of us for optimal appeal to human preferences. I set down my book, a battered copy of Marcus Aurelius that had belonged to my father before the accident. Do you know what seduction means to humans? She tilted her head. The act of enticing a potential mate through no. I stood, and she took an involuntary step back. Not because I was threatening, but because humans apparently moved with an unpredictability that unnerved Velanthi. Seduction is a transaction to you. A calculated exchange. Send the right combination of physical attributes, pheromones, and status signals, and the target should respond accordingly. Is this not accurate? For some, maybe. I walked to the window, looking out at the crystalline spires of the capital city. But you're all missing something fundamental. You're trying to claim me because the Queen ordered it. Not one of you has asked me about my favorite color. My fears. The scar on my left hand. You don't want HMA. You want the conquest. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, the Queen will not be pleased. The Queen can be as displeased as she likes. I'm not a puzzle to be solved or a territory to be claimed. I turned back to face her. Tell her that if she wants to understand humans, she should try talking to one, not sending 100 beautiful strangers to warm my bed. The woman left without another word. I didn't expect what happened next. The following evening, the door chimed again. I sighed, preparing another rejection speech, but when the door opened, the figure standing there made my breath catch. Queen Seraphis herself. She was taller than I'd imagined from the distant glimpses at court, nearly 7 feet, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with inner phosphorescence. The ceremonial robes of her station had been replaced with something simpler, almost humble. No crown, no guards, just a queen, standing in a diplomat's doorway, looking uncertain. You told my envoy that I should speak with a human myself, she said. Her voice was deeper than her subjects, rougher somehow. I am here, Your Majesty, Seraphis. She cut me off. If we are to speak as you suggested, titles seem counterproductive. I stepped aside to let her in, my mind racing. In 300 years of Velanthi history, no monarch had ever visited a foreign dignitary's quarters unannounced. It simply wasn't done. She moved through my small space like a shadow, examining my few possessions with those burning eyes. She paused at the photograph on my desk. Me and my younger sister, taken 2 years before the shuttle accident that had killed our parents and left her in a care facility I could barely afford. You carry grief, she observed. Not a question. Most humans do. We do not. She turned to face me. Velanthi process lost through ritual severance. The dead are honored, then released. Emotional attachment to what is gone is considered a weakness. And yet here you are, I said carefully, trying to understand a species that considers emotional attachment our greatest strength. Something flickered in her eyes. If I hadn't known better, I would have called it recognition. I have watched you, she admitted. From the shadows of the court, through surveillance systems, through the reports of my envoys. You fascinate me, Marcus Chen. Because I refused your offerings? Because you refuse everything? She took a step closer. Power, status, pleasure, all the currencies that motivate every species I have encountered. You reject them all. And yet, you are not passive. Not defeated. You sit in your quarters reading philosophy and drinking tea as if you have already found something better than what the galaxy offers. Her voice dropped. I need to understand what that is. I studied her face, the hard lines of authority, the isolation written in every perfect feature. The Velanthi considered their queens semi-divine. They were worshipped, obeyed, but never truly awe-known. Seraphis had ruled for 40 years. I wondered when someone had last asked her a question that wasn't about policy. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the small table where I took my meals. I'll make tea. She stared at me as if I'd suggested she dance naked through the court. You wish me to sit while you serve me. It's how humans start conversations. I filled the kettle. We share something. Food, drink, time. It's not about status. It's about showing that you value someone's presence enough to care for them. Slowly, like a predator uncertain of a trap, the Queen of the Velanthi Empire lowered herself into a chair at my table. And for the first time since I'd arrived on this world, I smiled. She came back the next night. And the night after that. We didn't speak of politics or alliances or the 100 women she'd sent to my bed. Instead, we talked about smaller things. She asked about Earth, its oceans, its chaotic weather, the absurdity of humans building cities in places that regularly flooded or erupted or froze. I asked about her childhood, the centuries of tradition that had shaped her into a ruler before she was old enough to understand what ruling meant. I was 7 when they told me I would never have a friend, she said one evening, cradling a cup of tea she'd grown to appreciate. Only subjects. Only servants. Friendship implies equality, and a queen can have no equals. That sounds lonely. It is functional. But her voice had no conviction. Can I tell you something? I leaned forward. On Earth we have a saying, it's lonely at the top. But we also have another one. Even kings need someone who'll tell them they have spinach in their teeth. Her brow furrowed. I don't understand the relevance of vegetation and dental status. It means everyone needs at least one person who sees them as human, or Velanthi, someone who isn't blinded by your title. I held her gaze. Someone who'll tell you uncomfortable truths because they care about you, not what you can give them. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, I almost missed it. No one has ever cared for me without agenda. I don't have an agenda. Everyone has an agenda. Mine is to drink tea with someone interesting and maybe understand why she sent 100 women to seduce a nobody diplomat from a backwater planet. Something cracked in her expression. Not anger. Exhaustion. A weariness so profound it made her ageless face suddenly ancient. Because I needed to know if you could be bought, she whispered. If you were like every other ambassador, every other dignitary, every suitor and sycophant who has sought my favor in 4 decades of rule. I needed to know if humans were truly different, or if your reputation for emotional resilience was simply better marketing. And she set down her cup with careful precision. You refused pleasure from 100 willing partners. You treated each one with respect while turning them away. You never mocked them, never boasted, never tried to leverage the situation for gain. And when you finally lost patience, your anger was not at being tested. It was at being misunderstood. She stood, and I stood with her. We were closer now than we'd ever been, close enough that I could see the faint pulse of bioluminescence beneath her obsidian skin. I have spent my entire reign searching for a consort, she said. Someone who could stand beside me without being consumed by my shadow. Someone who wanted Seraphis, not the queen. I interviewed candidates from 100 worlds. I rejected them all. Her burning eyes met mine. And then the Galactic Council sent me a human diplomat as an insult, and he sat in his quarters reading a dead philosopher's words about inner peace while my empire's finest females threw themselves at him. I wasn't trying to pass a test. I know. Her hand rose, hesitated, then gently touched my chest where my heart was pounding. That is precisely why you passed it. The moment stretched between us, fragile, impossible, charged with something neither of us had expected. Then the door burst open. High Counselor Thren stood in the doorway, his silver face contorted with horror. Behind him I could see guards, nobles, the entire apparatus of Velanthi power mobilizing in response to some unthinkable breach. Your Majesty? Thren's voice cracked. You were seen entering the humans' quarters, the court, the council. I am aware of my own movements, Counselor. Seraphis's voice could have frozen starlight. But the impropriety, a queen alone with an unbound male, the scandal, is my concern. She stepped away from me, and I felt the temperature in the room drop by degrees. The uncertain woman who'd been touching my heart moments ago was gone, replaced by a monarch whose displeasure could end civilizations. Return to your duties, all of you. They didn't move. I could see it in their faces. This wasn't mere concern for propriety. This was something deeper, something political. Your Majesty, Thren pressed, the Council has convened an emergency session. Your interest in the human has not gone unnoticed. There are factions who believe you have been compromised, influenced by alien manipulation. The human has been here for 2 months, Seraphis said coldly. In that time, he has attended 3 state dinners, filed 17 diplomatic reports, and spent most of his evenings reading books older than your family line. If this is manipulation, it is remarkably subtle. Subtle is precisely what makes it dangerous. Thren's eyes found mine, and the hatred in them was undisguised. The Council demands a demonstration of your autonomy. Proof that your judgment remains unclouded. Seraphis's hand clenched at her side. What manner of proof? The human must face the trial of worth. Thren smiled, a cold, triumphant expression. If he survives, his presence may continue. If not, well, we need not trouble ourselves with an unworthy species' diplomatic ambitions. I stepped forward. I'll do it. Both Velanthi turned to stare at me. Marcus, Seraphis breathed, and the use of my name, informal, intimate, made Thren's eyes widen further. The trial of worth has not been invoked in 2 centuries. It is designed for Velanthi warriors. For a human, I'm not going to be the reason your council removes you from power, I said quietly. And I'm not going to run from a challenge just because the odds are bad. That's not who I am. Her burning eyes searched my face. You could die. I could have died a dozen times before I got here. Car accidents, disease, a malfunctioning airlock on the transport ship. I managed a small smile. At least this time it would mean something. Something shifted in her expression. Something raw and unguarded that made my chest ache. Then, I will watch, she said. And whatever happens, Marcus Chen, know that you have already proven more than the Council could ever understand. She swept past Thren without another word, and the Councillor followed with one last venomous glance in my direction. I stood alone in my quarters, looking at my father's book still sitting on the desk. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I hoped Marcus Aurelius was right. I was going to need all the strength I could find. The trial of worth took place in an ancient arena carved from living crystal, deep beneath the capital city. Every seat was filled. Nobles, warriors, common citizens, all gathered to watch a human attempt something their own legends struggled to survive. I stood in the center of the arena floor, wearing simple clothing they'd provided. No weapons. No armor. The trial wasn't a test of combat skill. It was a test of will. The challenges came one after another, each designed to break a Velanthi warrior's legendary composure. First, the Chamber of Truths, a psychic barrage that tore through my mind, exposing every shameful memory, every secret fear, every moment of weakness I'd ever experienced. I saw my parents' faces in the wreckage. I heard my sister crying alone in the care facility. I felt the crushing loneliness of 2 months on an alien world where no one would look me in the eye. I let it wash over me. I didn't fight it. This is who I am. This is what made me. The nobles muttered in confusion. The Velanthi way was to build mental walls, to reject the intrusion. I simply accepted. Let the pain exist without being consumed by it. The second challenge was the labyrinth of isolation. 3 days alone in a crystalline maze, with no food, water, or human contact. The walls whispered despair. The silence screamed. Every turn led to another dead end. I talked to myself. Recited poetry. Sang off-key songs my mother had loved. I made friends with my own shadow and named it Dave. When I emerged, gaunt and staggering, the crowd was silent. No Velanthi had ever completed the labyrinth while maintaining coherent speech. The third challenge was the worst. They brought out Seraphis. She stood at the far end of the arena, dressed in full ceremonial regalia, her expression carved from stone. Beside her stood a male I didn't recognize, tall, powerful, draped in the insignia of a noble house. The final test, Thren announced, his voice carrying through the crystal acoustics, is the surrendering. The human must watch as Queen Seraphis is bonded to Lord Varric of the Third House, as was arranged before the human's interference began. My heart stopped. Seraphis's eyes met mine across the arena. In them I saw agony and resignation. This had been the plan all along. Break me with physical trials, then destroy me with emotional ones. Prove that I couldn't bear to watch her choose someone else. They were right. I couldn't bear it. But that wasn't what the trial was testing. I walked forward. The crowd gasped as I approached the dais, stopping just before the ceremonial circle where Seraphis and Lord Varric stood. Before this happens, I said quietly, I want to say something. Thren moved to stop me, but Seraphis raised a hand. Let him speak. I took a breath. Every eye in the arena was fixed on me, the insignificant human who had somehow survived trials meant for warriors, now standing before a queen he had no right to address. I know what you're expecting, I said, looking only at Seraphis. You expect me to beg, to declare my feelings, to make some grand gesture that proves I can't function without you, that humans are slaves to emotion who crumble when their attachments are threatened. I saw Thren's triumphant smile begin to form, but that's not what love is. That's not what any of this means. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small object, a crystal flower I'd bought from a street vendor during my second week on Velanthis. It had cost almost nothing. I'd been saving it for a moment that felt right. On Earth, we give flowers to people we care about, not because they're valuable or rare, but because they're beautiful and temporary. Like all the best things in life. I held it out to her. If you bond with Lord Varric, I won't stop you. I won't fall apart. I won't try to fight or flee or beg for mercy. Because loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. I set the flower on the ground at her feet. But I want you to know that for a few weeks, a nothing diplomat from a nothing planet was able to sit across from the most powerful woman in the Empire and just talk. And those conversations meant more to me than anything else I've experienced since I lost my family. My voice didn't waver, so whatever happens next, thank you. For seeing me. For asking questions. For drinking terrible tea without complaining. The arena was utterly silent. Seraphis stood frozen, staring at the flower as if it were a weapon pointed at her heart. Then slowly, she picked it up. The trial, she said, her voice strange and thick, tests whether a candidate is worthy to stand beside Velanthi royalty. It evaluates strength, endurance, and, above all, the capacity to place duty above personal desire. She turned to Thren, and her eyes blazed with a fury I'd never seen. This human has just demonstrated more worthiness in a single gesture than any Velanthi candidate I have reviewed in 40 years of rule. He did not beg, manipulate, or break. He did not attempt to claim what wasn't his. He simply gave. Without expectation. Without agenda. She raised the flower. He offered me a gift that cost him nothing, and proved that he understands something your entire council has failed to grasp. Your Majesty, Thren started. The trial is complete. Seraphis's voice rang through the crystal chamber. The human, Marcus Chen, has passed. Lord Varric, your services are no longer required. Councillor Thren, you are dismissed from your position pending review of your conduct in orchestrating this farce. Thren's silver face went pale. You cannot. The council. I am the queen. Seraphis descended from the dais, each step deliberate, her burning eyes never leaving mine. The council advises. It does not rule. And I'm advising you, former councillor, to leave my presence before I remember every other grievance I have accumulated against your house over the past 4 decades. Thren fled. The arena erupted into chaos. Nobles shouting, guards uncertain of their orders, Lord Varric's family demanding explanations. But none of it seemed to reach us. Seraphis stopped in front of me, the crystal flower still cradled in her obsidian hands. You would have let me go, she said softly. You would have watched me bond with another and walked away with your dignity intact? Yes. I looked up at her. This impossible creature, this queen of an empire that spanned star systems, this woman who had spent 40 years searching for someone who could see past her crown. Because my father taught me that love isn't about possession. It's about choice. Every day, every moment, choosing to stay. Choosing to care, choosing to put someone else's well-being alongside your own. I swallowed hard. I would never want you to be with me because you felt obligated or trapped. I would want you to choose it. Freely. Every time. Her hand rose to my face. Cool obsidian fingers tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. Then I choose. She whispered, freely. Now, and every moment after. The formal bonding ceremony took place 3 months later, after the political dust had settled, and the galaxy had absorbed the shock of a human becoming consort to the Velanthi Queen. Earth's government didn't know how to react. They'd sent me as a throwaway diplomat expecting nothing. Now I was positioned beside one of the most powerful rulers in known space, and suddenly humanity's galactic standing looked very different. I didn't care about any of that. What I cared about was the way Seraphis looked at me when she thought no one was watching. The softening of her hard features, the quiet warmth in her burning eyes. I cared about the tea ceremonies that had become our private ritual, the conversations that stretched until dawn, the slow dismantling of walls neither of us had realized we'd built. I cared about the night she told me about her first love, a childhood companion who had been executed when her parents discovered the friendship, believing it would compromise her ability to rule. I held her while she wept tears she'd stored for 2 centuries, and I didn't offer solutions or wisdom. I just stayed. That was what humans did. We stayed. The morning of the bonding ceremony, I found her standing on the balcony of her private chambers, looking out at the crystalline city she'd ruled for 40 years. Having second thoughts? I asked, coming to stand beside her. Third thoughts. Fourth. She glanced at me with something approaching humor, an expression she'd learned from me. My advisors believe I've lost my mind. They may be correct. Probably. I took her hand, something that still made her breath catch, even after months of stolen moments. But if you're going to lose your mind, might as well do it with someone who'll help you look for it. She laughed, a sound so rare that servants in the hallway below stopped to stare. The ambassador from the Dralith Confederacy arrived this morning, she said. He asked me what possible strategic advantage a human consort provides. What did you tell him? That you make excellent tea. Her fingers intertwined with mine. And that for the first time in 4 decades, I no longer dread waking up. I squeezed her hand. High praise, the highest. The ceremony itself was a blur of ritual and spectacle, ancient words spoken in languages older than humanity's fire, crystalline bonds woven around our joined hands, the weight of a consort's crown settling onto my temples. I remembered very little of it afterward, but I remembered the moment Seraphis turned to me, in front of her entire empire and representatives from 30 worlds, and said the words that would echo through galactic history. I sent 100 women to seduce this man. I watched from the shadows as he refused each one, not from lack of desire but from abundance of principle. I tested him with trials that have broken our greatest warriors, and in the end, it was he who tested Aimee. Her voice rang through the great hall. He showed me that strength is not found in walls but in vulnerability. That power means nothing without someone to share it with. That the greatest conquest is not of territory or enemies, but of one's own isolation. She placed her hand over my heart, that same gesture from our first real conversation, now laden with new meaning. The Velanthi Empire has always valued strength. Today, we expand that definition to include the quiet strength of staying, of choosing, of offering flowers instead of demands. She looked out at the assembled masses, nobles who had doubted, ambassadors who had scoffed, subjects who had questioned their queen's sanity. Let the galaxy know that humanity is no longer a minor species to be dismissed. They are our partners, our family. Her burning eyes found mine, our heart. The cheering that followed shook the crystal foundations of the palace. Later, after the celebrations had quieted, and we'd escaped to the privacy of our chambers, Seraphis stood before me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Nervous, almost shy. I have something for you, she said. From the folds of her ceremonial robe, she produced a small, battered book. My father's copy of Marcus Aurelius. How? I had it retrieved from your quarters before they were cleared for our new residence. She held it out to me with careful reverence. I know what it means to you. I wanted you to have it here in our home, so that he is with us. I took the book with trembling hands, running my fingers over the cracked spine, the water-stained pages, my father's handwritten notes in the margins. Seraphis, you taught me what love means, she said softly. Now, I am learning to show it. She hesitated, uncertain in a way that would have been unthinkable months ago. I am trying. I set the book aside and pulled her into my arms, still a startling act for a Velanthi, this full-body embrace that humans took for granted. She stiffened for just a moment, then melted against me, her obsidian forehead resting against my temple. You're doing perfectly, I whispered. I have an excellent teacher. We stood there for a long time, 2 impossible people who had somehow found each other across the gulf of species and status and centuries of isolation. Outside, the galaxy continued its ancient dance, wars and alliances, empires rising and falling, species clawing for position in the endless hierarchy of power. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the weight of her in my arms, the steady beat of her alien heart against my chest, the knowledge that tomorrow we would wake up and choose this again, and the day after. And the day after that, my father's voice echoed in my memory. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. I thought about crystal flowers and tea ceremonies, about conversations that lasted until dawn, about a queen who had sent 100 women to seduce me, and then came herself, uncertain and aching, asking to be seen. I thought about how far I'd come from that tiny quarters where I'd refused to play the galaxy's games, armed with nothing but philosophy and stubbornness and an unwillingness to be anything other than exactly who I was. And I smiled against her skin. "What amuses you?" she asked, pulling back to study my face. "I was just thinking, when we tell this story to our children someday, they're never going to believe the part about the 100 women." She stared at me. "Children? Is that not something you want?" Her burning eyes widened, then softened with an emotion so profound it made my chest ache. "I had stopped allowing myself to want it," she admitted. "Queens are expected to produce heirs, but I always swore I would not bring a child into the same isolation I experienced." Her hand found mine. "With you, it would be different. They would have a father who understood warmth, and a mother who's learning." "Still learning," she agreed. "Always learning." I kissed her then, gently, reverently, the way humans did when words weren't enough. She kissed me back with the fierce determination she brought to everything, as if trying to communicate 4 decades of loneliness and the fragile hope that had replaced it. When we parted, her forehead rested against mine. "Thank you," she whispered, "for refusing to be seduced." "Thank you," I replied, "for watching from the shadows long enough to see who I really was." Outside our window, the first sun of the Velanthi system began to rise, setting crystal spires ablaze with light. A new day was beginning, on this world, in this empire, in the life we were building together. And somewhere in the galaxy I knew, humanity was no longer being dismissed as insignificant. Because love, it turned out, was the most powerful force of all. Not the desperate, grasping kind that the Council had tested for, but the quiet kind, the staying kind, the kind that could look at loneliness across a tea table and simply choose to sit with it, day after day, until it transformed into something else entirely. My father would have been proud. And for the first time since the accident that had taken him, I was at peace.